Jay Pritchett tells a story once, almost as a joke, about the only time his father ever kissed him goodnight. He tells it at a party, casually, the way you'd mention what you had for breakfast. His father walked into the wrong room in the dark. He thought Jay was his sister. That's it. That's the one goodnight kiss Jay ever got, and he only got it by accident. Jay laughs when he tells it, wait, nobody in the room laughs back. Because that's not a funny story, that's a grown man casually mentioning the one time he was touched with any tenderness as a child, and framing it like small talk. So here's the real question. If Jay is the toughest person in this family, why does one accidental kiss from 40 years ago still sit in his memory like it happened yesterday? If you like finding the crack under the toughest character in a show, subscribe now, because that's exactly the kind of thing this channel goes looking for. On the surface, Jay is simple, old school, blunt, allergic to feelings, the guy who shows love by fixing your car, not by saying anything out loud. That's the joke the show sets up early and mostly keeps. Except watch what happens the one time someone actually corners him. A doctor runs a family session meant to get everyone talking about buried resentment. Jay treats the whole thing like a waste of an afternoon. He deflects, jokes, tries to leave twice weight, then, without much warning, he's the one who ends up crying, not performing it, actually crying about his own father, in front of his kids, for the first time any of them have ever seen. The toughest man in the house turns out to have the thinnest wall around whatever he's actually carrying. Here's the detail that explains why that wall is so thin in the first place. Jay's father fought in the war, came home, and never really learned how to be soft again. Jay describes him as a man's man, someone who worked, provided, and said almost nothing else. His mother was the opposite. She was warm, openly affectionate, the kind of parent who kept a poem her 9-year-old son wrote her tucked inside a cookbook for years. So Jay didn't grow up starved of love entirely. He grew up watching exactly what it looked like from one parent, while the other parent made it clear that wasn't for men. Long after his father dies, Jay admits something quieter. He wonders if his father ever knew Jay loved him, not the other way around. Wait, you'd expect the child to wonder if the parent loved him. Jay flips it. He spent decades assuming the love was obvious on his end, and never once checked if his father actually received it. That's not simple grief. That's a man who learned, very early, that love in this family gets assumed, never confirmed. So naturally, Jay breaks the pattern with his own kids. That would be the tidy version of this story, except go check what actually happens with Claire and Mitchell's growing up. Claire gets Jay's competitiveness, his bluntness, his refusal to lose at anything. She also gets pushed hard toward being tough enough to earn his approval. The same currency he was raised on, Mitchell gets something worse. For years, Jay struggles to fully accept who his son is, not through cruelty, but through the same discomfort his own father would have shown him. He's not copying his father on purpose, he's just never been taught another way to love someone out loud. The exact wound Jay carries gets quietly handed down before he even notices he's doing it. Here's the detail that really complicates the picture, though. Manny isn't Jay's biological son. He's Gloria's son from a previous marriage, and by every rule Jay grew up with, that relationship should be the distant one. Instead, Jay ends up genuinely tender with him, teaching him to fish, showing up for the strange, sensitive hobbies most stepfathers in this era might have mocked. Wait, the son Jay has no biological obligation to get more open affection than the ones he raised from birth. That's not random. With Manny, there's no old score to settle, no inherited script about what a Pritchett son is supposed to look like. Jay can just be soft, because nothing about Manny reminds him of the version of fatherhood he was taught to perform. Here's where it gets harder to just feel sorry for him. Though Jay isn't only avoiding his own feelings, he's controlling everyone else's access to his D, his first wife, spends years using Mitchell as leverage in their fights. And Jay mostly responds by shutting the door further, not confronting it directly. Gloria pushes constantly for him to say things out loud, and half the time he treats that as an attack instead of an invitation. Wait. The man everyone assumes is just quietly wounded is also, at the exact same time, actively keeping people at arm's length on purpose. Broken and guarded aren't opposites here, they're the same habit, running in two directions at once. There's another moment that shows this even more clearly. Jay has a health scare, one of the few times his body actually forces him to stop and sit still. He treats it exactly like he treats every emotional conversation. He minimizes it, jokes about it, tries to get back to work before anyone can hover wait. The same man who cries over a decades-old memory of his father can't sit in a waiting room for 10 minutes without deflecting. It's not that Jay can't feel fear, it's that fear, like grief, like love, only gets to exist on his terms in short bursts. When nobody's watching too closely, then Joe is born. And something shifts that didn't shift with Claire or Mitchell. Jay starts trying, visibly, not to repeat the old pattern. He shows up differently, softer, more present, more willing to actually say the thing instead of just doing the chore that stands in for it. That should be the happy ending right there. Except notice what it also quietly confirms. If Jay could soften for Joe, he could have softened for Claire and Mitchell too. He just didn't know he was allowed to yet. That's a harder thing to sit with than simple growth. It means the version of Jay his older kids needed already existed somewhere inside him. It just took 30 more years and a second chance to let it out. So back to that family therapy session and the tears nobody expected. Jay wasn't crying about being forced to talk. He was crying because somebody finally asked him a question his own father never got the chance to answer. Did you know I loved you? He never got to hear that answered for himself. So when his own kids finally ask it back to him, it breaks something loose he'd been holding shut since he was a boy standing in a dark room, mistaken for someone else, and grateful for it anyway. That's the version of Jay almost nobody outside that room ever sees again. The show mostly lets him go right back to deflecting the next episode, cracking a joke, changing the subject, but the crack doesn't close. It just goes back under the surface, waiting for the next moment someone's brave enough to ask the real question. So back to that goodnight kiss, the one his father gave him by accident, thinking he was his sister. Jay tells that story like a punchline. It isn't one, it's the whole blueprint for a man who spent his entire life assuming love had to be earned, or stumbled into, or received in the dark, half by mistake. The most broken part of Jay Pritchett was never that he couldn't feel things. It's that he spent most of his life waiting for someone to prove it was safe to say so. I'd love to know if you think he ever fully got there. And if you like finding the quiet damage hiding under the toughest character in a show, subscribe because there's more waiting here.